Welcome in, everyone, to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the life and work of David Lynch. Sadly, he passed away recently, and you all have sent in some amazing material about him.
It's a really an interesting time to look back. When you think about David Lynch, right?
Yeah.
The word filmmaker comes to mind, I think, for a lot of people, but he was so much more than that.
Yeah. He was a painter and a musician and an advocate for transcendental meditation. It's like, how did all those things come together to make the David Lynch that we know and love? Where'd that all come from?
I think to really understand his films, you got to start with his background as a painter.
Okay.
His early paintings, they're full of these kind of unsettling textures, stark contrasts. It's almost like they're these premonitions of the industrial landscapes that he would later put on film in Eraserhead.
Oh, wow. Yeah, in Eraserhead. That was his first film, right?
Yeah, his debut feature film.
What was the reaction to that? Because, I've seen it. It's a pretty wild film to just come out of the gate with.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre film. And, and it really did divide audiences. You had some people who hailed it as a masterpiece of surrealist horror, Right. And then others who, found it just too strange or even repulsive.
Yeah. Yeah. So he comes out swinging with this super strange film that, I guess finds an audience.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do we get from that world to The Elephant Man, which got nominated for 8 Oscars or something?
8 Academy Awards. Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. It's such a shift in tone. It's like, how did he make that transition?
It speaks to his range as a director. I think that,
he could make these deeply personal, experimental films, and then turn around and create something that, really resonated with a much wider audience and was, critically acclaimed. But even in The Elephant Man, you see those kind of classic, Lynchian elements, the focus on an outsider, the kind of, blurring of beauty and grotesqueness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's so interesting about him is that he could do those two seemingly completely opposite things. Mm-hmm. But there was always this kind of thread. There was this this darkness and a surrealness that we've come to kind of call Lynchian.
Exactly. And it's that ability to kind of blend genres and tones that makes him so difficult to categorize. Even if you take Blue Velvet, for example, on the surface, it's got this classic film noir setup. You've got this young man who stumbles upon, some dark secret in his seemingly idyllic hometown.
Right.
But then Lynch, injects this layer of surrealism and psychological horror that just takes it so much deeper than, just a simple, crime thriller.
Yeah. And how about the music?
Oh, yeah.
How did he use music in his films? Because I feel like you can't talk about David Lynch without talking about the music.
Yeah, well, in Blue Velvet, he uses Bobby Vinton's version of Blue Velvet, and it's a great example of how he can take something familiar and make it unsettling and even sinister.
How that song plays during this disturbing encounter? It's
right.
Brilliant. And it's awful, but it's brilliant all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then how does he go from Blue Velvet to Mulholland Drive?
Yeah.
Because that was another one where it's whoa, what is even happening here? It was so dreamlike, and people are still debating what it even means.
Mulholland Drive, it's fascinating because there is no single agreed upon interpretation of that film. You have, some people who think it's a commentary on the dark side of Hollywood and others who see it as purely psychological. It's an exploration of identity and desire.
I remember the first time I saw Mulholland Drive, I walked out of the theater and I was just what did I just watch? Right. My brain was scrambled.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I just saw, but it was incredible. It really stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Mulholland Drive, a very dreamlike. But it just showed how much of a master he was at atmosphere and at visual storytelling.
Absolutely.
The way he uses light and shadow and sound to create a world that feels, both familiar and totally dreamlike. And the rules of reality are just kind of bent and broken in his films. Mm-hmm. And, you can't talk about David Lynch without talking about Twin Peaks.
Right.
That was the show that kind of broke all the rules of television.
Mm-hmm. Twin Peaks is so fascinating because it took all that stuff that he had been working on in his films, all the surrealism and the darkness and even the humor, and he brought it into people's living rooms with television.
It's funny you mentioned the humor. I feel like sometimes people forget that about him.
Yeah, there is a sense of humor that runs through his films. It's it's not always super serious and heavy.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are these like really strange, funny moments and quirky characters, and I think Twin Peaks really showcases that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you have characters like the log lady and the man from another place,
right?
You know, alongside these really creepy and unsettling moments. It's just all mixed up together.
I remember watching Twin Peaks when it first came out and just being like, what is going to happen next?
Right.
You know, it's like every week I was on the edge of my seat. I had no idea where it was going.
And he was subverting expectations left and right. Like nobody had seen anything like it on TV before.
I mean, so many shows have come out since then that you can tell were influenced by Twin Peaks.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like Lost and Stranger Things, even The Killing. You can see that same kind of DNA in those shows.
Yeah, that sense of mystery and, you know, something's not quite right under the surface.
Like in this idyllic small town, bad things are happening.
Mm-hmm. And the music, too. We got to talk about the music. Angelo Badalamenti.
Oh, yeah.
Like his score for Twin Peaks is just as iconic as the show itself.
It just sets the mood so perfectly, you know, that dreamy unease.
Yeah, it's so unsettling and beautiful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of collaborators, he's worked with some amazing actors over the years.
Oh, so many.
MacLachlan.
Yes.
Like he's in a lot of his stuff. And of course, he was Agent Cooper in Twin Peaks.
Agent Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just the perfect Lynchian protagonist, you know?
Yeah.
Earnest, but a little bit quirky, often finds himself in some very weird situations.
And Laura Dern, too.
Oh, yeah. She's fantastic.
She's another one who's in a bunch of his films.
It's like he has this stable of actors who he just loves to work with.
Right.
And they get him, you know, they understand his vision and they're willing to go to those strange places with him.
It's like a whole universe of actors that are connected to his style.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about, you know, the visuals and the stories and the actors, but I want to go back to the music for a second because it's really central to his work, I think.
Oh, for sure. It's not just background music. You know, it's like another character in his films.
Right, like we mentioned Blue Velvet, but then there's also the way he uses Roy Orbison's In Dreams in that film.
Oh.
It's like such a beautiful song, but in the context of that scene, it becomes terrifying.
It's so creepy. It completely transforms the song.
And he does that a lot.
Yeah, he takes these well-known songs and just twists them. He puts them in this different context, and suddenly they're unsettling.
Like you never hear those songs the same way again?
Nope, never.
I'm reminded of this quote of his. I think it kind of gets at his philosophy.
Okay.
He said, "Keep your eye on the donut and not on the hole."
What a great quote.
I know, I love it.
It makes you think, huh?
Yes, like don't focus on the emptiness. Focus on the substance, you know?
Yeah, focus on the good stuff even when things are dark.
Right, and find the light in the unexpected.
Exactly.
It's kind of how he approached his art too, don't you think?
I think so. He didn't shy away from the darkness, but he always found a way to bring in the light.
So when you think about all his films, what would you say makes a film Lynchian? Like, what are those key elements?
Well, for me, it's that mix of surrealism and darkness, but also humor, you know?
Right.
It's the way he blends dreams and reality, and the way he uses music and visuals to create this world that's familiar and unsettling all at once.
Yeah, and the characters, too.
Oh, yeah, those unforgettable characters.
Like they're often outsiders or eccentrics trying to make sense of this weird world.
Exactly.
It's not just a style, it's a whole feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like a way of seeing the world that's both disturbing and exciting at the same time.
He wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a true visionary, an artist who changed how we think about what movies can be.
He made us look at the world in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
To see the beauty and the strangeness in everyday life.
And his legacy will continue to inspire other artists and filmmakers for years to come.
Absolutely. So as we dig deeper into David Lynch's world,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's worth thinking about how his vision might impact you. How does his work make you see the world a little bit differently? You know, it's interesting to think about like the impact of his work beyond film.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in music and art, even fashion.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That whole Lynchian aesthetic has become like a thing.
It's so recognizable, you know, that mix of retro Americana and surreal imagery and that underlying sense of dread, you know.
It's become like shorthand for a certain kind of atmosphere, like a feeling of unease.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the aesthetics.
Right.
His work has sparked all these conversations about the darker sides of human nature.
Yeah, the stuff that we try to hide or ignore.
Right, like he forces us to confront the uncomfortable stuff.
The unsettling stuff.
Yeah, and he shows us that even in the most ordinary places,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's this potential for darkness.
Yeah, for violence, for the subconscious to erupt.
And I think that's why his films are so polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are drawn to that, that exploration of the taboo.
Right.
And others just find it repulsive.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how powerful his work is.
Right.
He's not afraid to be controversial, to make people think.
And he does it in a way that's both like intellectually stimulating,
Mm-hmm.
but also really emotionally engaging.
Yeah, his films aren't just puzzles to be solved.
Right.
They're experiences, you feel them.
Yeah, you really feel them. And I think one of the reasons why people are still talking about his work and watching his films, decades later,
Mm-hmm.
is because they're so open to interpretation.
Totally.
There's no right answer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, like, this is what it means.
He doesn't give you a clear explanation.
Yeah, he gives you these fragments, these dreamlike images,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to kind of piece it together yourself.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so engaging.
Yeah.
You have to participate in the meaning making.
Yeah. So as we come to the end of our deep dive into David Lynch,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the most important thing to remember about his legacy?
I think it's his commitment to his vision.
Okay.
He never compromised his artistic integrity, even when it meant, maybe losing some fans or getting bad reviews.
Right.
He just did his own thing, and he created this incredible body of work that's both challenging and rewarding.
He showed us that art doesn't have to be easy or comfortable.
Right?
It can be weird. It can be unsettling.
It can make you question everything.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
That's what makes it so powerful.
Right. It's in those moments of discomfort that we learn and grow.
Exactly.
He challenged us to look beyond the surface, to embrace the mystery of life.
And that's a challenge worth accepting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next time you encounter something that's strange or unsettling or maybe even a little Lynchian,
Mm-hmm.
don't be afraid of it.
Lean into it.
Yeah. Explore it. You might be surprised at what you find.
You just might.
Well, that's a perfect place to end it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of David Lynch.